We've got one question coming on chat. Is it true that there's a correlation um, between increased ability to recycle a material and the increase of the virgin extraction of that material? Maybe this depends on the material itself as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see some data. I hear a lot of talk. Layla Adrolu, who I've done a lot of work with, talks about recycling as is a facilitator of consumption, because it basically we start to get overly excited that it's solved. Yep, there's a recycled version, or it can be recycled, and we then facilitate that. And look, you might see that if there's something that has better recycling outcomes, that we use more of it. That's not necessarily a bad outcome if it was displacing a bunch of things which had bad recycling outcomes, and that there is a consequent amount of other material going down, putting aside, population growth and overall changes in consumption. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that the recyclable thing, as it gets more recyclable, also that the virgin material grows if we swing our focus into those materials at the displacement of other materials. But you'd really want to look at that displacement, and there is certainly we really want to keep that. We need to balance all these things. We need to do all these things at once, and so just making sure that we don't have backsliding when it comes to, okay, it's recyclable now, we don't have to focus on our other strategies. But Kirby, I'd be very interested if you know whether there's a data on that trend. It'd be an interesting one to point to. Increasing renewables will really help the recycling. I think when you look at how stuff is made, most recycling activities are a lot of mechanical processes, a lot of electricity, while a lot of virgin material production, let's say refineries and petrochemical plants and steel mills and things, are very dominated by thermal reductive processes that are highly reliant on combustion heat and reduction fuels and cokes and things like that. And so I think the benefits of recycling will increase for a lot of those commodities where the recycling loop will have a lot lower impact than it currently does. Also, something like paper will certainly benefit. So the renewable economy will help the recycling economy substantially, I believe. There might be a few examples where you end up with where the virgin product actually's impacts drop a lot, that's when that happens, so be it. In fact, if we could make a virgin product at 1/10 of its current impact and the recycling loop doesn't look so good, I would take the tenfold reduction, and then maybe work on how you deal with the end of life.
Any more questions from everyone else? We have nearly 10 minutes of questions.
I think on the question of soft plastics, I think as they come at the moment, obviously there is significant, a lot of successful recycling of things like pallet wrapping and industrial and post and sort of not end consumer, but supply chain consumption, where there are plastics that can be recycled that are soft. But your traditional multi-layer films, soft plastics from post-consumer, I think there's a real question about, do we, there's been a very strong push in the recycling community that we need real mechanical recycling, and that's really the true recycling, because you're turning physical things into other physical things. And we've been a bit scared of if we have energy recycling and burning it basically to make energy, that's not a great outcome. And as we get more renewable energy, the actual energy loops from waste materials become absolutely irrelevant. There's no reason to burn things for energy because we can make energy in much better ways. So I think the outcomes, given that there's a lot of value in those small flexible plastics and it's very hard to get rid of them, that chemical recycling probably has a really positive role to play that might be more sensible than pressing them all into a bollard or a plastic leaching piece of furniture. I sort of feel like we need to be open to what those different outcomes might be, unless there's some really clever technologies that can do some separation or something more valuable than those.
There's a question: traceability of a product seems to be an issue. Is this due to various technologies in use or lack of standardized processes? I would say traceability, even if you trace a product and know that it contains a different mix than what it would usually have. Like the example I took was, there's a traditional concrete mix and there's a concrete mix with plastic fiber. It's a way of tracking to know where the damage could come, rather than actually justifying it. So if the problem is that if you don't know also where the products is differentiated, you would have completely no track of identifying where any possible differentiation has to be made after X number of years when that building is demolished. So traceability basically helps you put further risk management measures, rather than it doesn't negate the it doesn't negate the impact.
I think the other side of that traceability thing is the traceability of recycled content, verification that recycled content is actually recycled content. And there's like some solutions for blockchaining and verification of the source of recycled content.
Ralph, you had a question?
Yes, thanks very much, Tim, and you to Mayuri. Great presentations. Tim, I liked your characterization of the big opportunities being where there's a big gap presents itself, and you settle on soft plastics as the example. Given your knowledge of the big waste flows in Australia, where would you say the opportunities are, other than say for soft plastics, which is obviously a major waste flow issue? Do you see any others that sort of stand out? You're almost presented a hierarchy, if you will, by way of the way the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I can't. It's almost unbelievable that we seem to be having problems recycling solar panels when we've had, a 20-year warm up, and we know it was coming, and we still sort of faffed about and now wondering how we do it. And this is in modern times when we already should have known better.
Yes.
So I think there's huge opportunities to make sure that as we, the biggest thing that's happening is going to be the electrification of the economy, and so we're using a lot of very valuable precious metals in there that all technologically should be mean that system should be an absolute closed system. So I assume that the economics should be in favor of it too. It's not like we've got small amounts of stuff distributed like we do with plastics and other things. These are like so that's a big opportunity, and I think we have to we're going to have to learn to embrace the whole the plastics economy for what it is, see how it transforms, and how we bring that in as part of what we do. Outside of that, glass is an interesting one. It's a real, always ridden on the fact that it's, people would almost, if you gave them a list and said, tick the products which are natural, people would almost tick glass as being a natural product because it's made from sand, and sand is natural. It's like, okay, oil is natural too because it's in the environment and we make plastics from that. So that's natural. And I find the glass ones sort of, because it's so heavy, and sort of difficult to, if you don't have a bottle plant and a wine industry or a local beer industry, I think there's a lot of challenges in that space to deal with something that has high levels of recovery, but the actual overall environmental balance there is not fantastic. Textiles are the other big one. So we've got some funky things now coming through with enzymes and things where hopefully they can get little enzymes that go in and eat up the polyester, and different enzymes will eat up the nylon, and something else will leave behind the cotton, and we can regenerate some new feedstocks and things. But again, all those recycling loop things, the loop will still have a lot of impact, even if you can get those materials back. Yes, we'd get them out of landfill, but that doesn't mean great. We can now go back to our fast fashion lifestyle. You got to obviously hit those things in both directions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Tim, there's a question from Kirby, and I could take the question from Alison on the chat.
Okay. Using recycling as second life, do we discount for emissions from extraction manufacturing processes? Do we spread them across the estimated number of lives? Typically, the number of lives thing, when we do an LCA, we do one life, and we do this thing called allocation at the point of substitution. So as you put the material back in, and maybe I recycle a kilogram of paper and I put back 800 grams of waste of paper because I lose 20% in when I'm washing it and fiber loss, and then I say that 80%, 800 grams offsets 800 grams or maybe 750 grams of a craft pulp. So we do that substitution. We do it as we do it with the way the technology is, and so we don't need to sit and work out how many times one piece of fiber will go around. We just say, when we do it once, this is the net outcome. The only time that isn't the case, or we have to think a little bit further, which we have been doing for a few recent things, is where we are currently in a system where you can recycle PET, and all of your input PET is virgin, pretty much. Like, the amount of secondary PET in the supply chain is so small. And so when you recycle it, it all still looks really good. If you're in Europe and there's 50% of PET is from secondary content, when you collect it all up from bottles and you go to recycle it, it's already been around on average once, and the quality of the polymer is starting to degrade. And so there's some supplementary activities which need to happen when we hit that point, and no one's really hitting that point except maybe the Europeans, and even there I think it's it's maybe a future thing rather than a current thing. When we hit that point, yes, we're going to have to do some polymer chain rebuilding, and there are things you can do to polymers to help them along. You could just bleed in some extra virgin if you need to, or there are some things you can do to chemical treatment. So I think, yes, in the longer term, you need to do that. And when we need to account for that, I'll be wrapped, because it'll mean that we've progressed to a stage where we're really starting to hit some of these limits, rather than, having recycled content rates of 2, 3, 5%.
Alrighty. The last question from Alison. I think we are almost coming to the end of the webinar. So what you've asked about is some plastics which are not, which are being collected in a sort of a more, I would say, an exclusive network. And I guess the idea here is that you can collect things with a certain degree of purity when you do a very customized type of collection. But on the other hand, you got to think, I guess, probably Tim can add into that, the costs, or rather the environmental costs associated with a very exclusive type of collection. If we have a standardized scheme collecting material, we have shared emissions for collection. Whereas if you have an exclusive scheme of collecting material, even though the material is pure and you can divert it to upcycle solutions, there's already a cost associated with collection, environmental cost associated with collection. So I guess the question in instances like that is the I think Tim spoke about it, how scarce the material is. Is it something that you actually, where the presence of material or the preservation of material has more higher value compared to diverting into upcycling has far better value compared to the emissions associated with operating a very environmentally costly collection scheme. Anything to add there, Tim?
Yeah, I think this is like the TerraCycle model where they come in and, they're collecting a cap or, posting back things. And I think it's, I'm not quite sure what I, personally think about it, but it is very much, I suppose it's a disruptor, and it's sort of creating something that can't be done and providing that sort of solution. But there's no way you could scale that in any way. Unlikely that it's going to be that the environmental balance will stack up by the time you do all that, posting back and mucking about with tiny bits of plastic. So I think it's it's an interesting thing to do, to say, how extreme would we need to do it? Yeah, I think we tried to do that, and the whole post had all this material going backwards and forwards. It'd be hugely inefficient. I had a slide which I deleted, which I was sort of talking about, don't get obsessed with the story. And so, a lot of those TerraCycle type things, and hopefully there's no from TerraCycle on, so no, but it's like there's this story, and the brand wants to have, their buttons off of their shirts come back and turn into their coffee mugs in their office. And it's like, okay, that's a great for an installation, for a story, for a blog, but that's not how we want to run. We don't run the virgin economy like that. We don't want to run. We want to run the recycling economy like we run the virgin economy. We want it to be commodified. We want it to be mainstream. We want it to be optimized, both economically and logistically and things. And so that's why we need solutions that are going to operate on that level rather than bespoke. And the bespokes, it's good to do. I think this is a demonstration to say, whoever's buying that product is paying for that additional service. So I don't begrudge it being, but if I was, I think that's an interim solution while you then work on the next layer of the solution. And you wouldn't want to be, I don't know, Patagonia or someone and telling everyone they should do this. You would say, look how ridiculous it is what we've got to do to recycle our products. We need a solution that we've all got to work on together, and using that as a lever to do that, rather than as a, we now have uncovered the secret way to do that. We just post everything around until we get it back. So I think it's we want to contextualize it in the right way, and certainly that's not the future from my point of view.
Alrighty, we have gone 7 minutes behind, so I'll probably end it with the last 2 slides that we have on the next webinars. Let me quickly share my screen, and there's a survey at the end. If you could could probably copy the link and do it. Let me. Sorry. Yeah, so this is to basically share about the next webinars and trainings that we are having. So we have a few courses being released in the next few months. Developing strategic plans for the circular economy, circular procurement course is being run in August, and how to create transition roadmaps. There's a course in September, and sustainable procurement course is run in October. The next webinar would be in August. I think we would like to focus that on the material design perspective, bringing the material design perspective about circular economy. And we are currently in the process of finalizing speakers, and we hope to be in touch with you about this very soon. So if you could give us feedback, that would be fantastic. I think it'll help Tim and myself to basically understand whether we met your requirements, or what else do you need to know in conducting future webinars like this. I thank Tim and all of you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you. We had a lot of great questions and active participation, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayuri.